In a land worn by drought and despair, Kale was just a tired farmer, struggling to feed his family while the earth lay dry beneath him. One day, as he plowed his fields, he struck something hard and uncovered an ancient relic covered in strange symbols. A soft glow surrounded the artifact, filling Kale with a sense of hope. He felt a deep connection to the land, as if the relic was promising a future where crops would thrive once more. Little did he know, this discovery would change everything. Kale wiped the sweat from his brow as he continued to plow his fields under the unforgiving sun. Each stroke of the plow felt heavier than the last. The earth was dry, cracked, and unyielding, reflecting the growing hunger of his family. He could not shake the feeling that the land was in mourning, just like him. "What will I tell them tonight?" he murmured to himself, his voice barely rising above the sound of the plow cutting through the dirt. As he pushed on, his thoughts wandered to his daughter, Lyra. Her laughter was a spark of light in these dark times, but laughter could only do so much when the harvest had failed. With every minute that passed, his heart sank further. Just as he was about to give in to despair, his plow struck something hard beneath the soil. Startled, he stopped and knelt down, curiosity igniting within him. "What is this?" Kale whispered, digging with his hands. The earth had concealed something from him, something ancient. As he uncovered the object, he noticed strange runes etched into its surface, glowing faintly. A soft, ethereal light began to emanate from the relic, spilling over his calloused hands and illuminating his face. Kyle felt his heart race. Could this be a sign? He reached out cautiously, letting his fingers brush against the cool surface. Instantly, a wave of warmth surged through him, and he gasped. It was as if the earth itself was speaking to him, whispering promises of a future filled with life and bounty. "What do you want?" he asked, almost pleading. The relic pulsed gently in response, and in that moment, Kale felt a connection that transcended time and space. It was more than just a piece of stone. It was a part of the land's spirit. "What is it, Father?" Lyra's voice broke through his reverie. She had wandered closer, her eyes wide with wonder. Kale looked at her, momentarily torn between the joy of discovery and the weight of his responsibilities. "It's something special," he replied, his voice trembling. "It might help us." Lyra stepped closer, her small hands reaching out toward the glowing relic. "Can it make the flowers grow again?" she asked, her innocent hope shining through her eyes. Kale nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. But what would it mean for his family, for their village? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the fields, Kale felt a newfound determination brewing within him. This could be the answer to their prayers, the key to saving their dying land. But with hope came fear. The world outside their quiet village was fraught with danger, and such power could attract unwanted attention. "What if others find out?" he murmured, glancing around as if the very trees could hear him. "What if they want to take it away?" Lyra's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Then we have to keep it safe, right? We can't let anyone take it." Kale chuckled softly, touched by her fierce spirit. "Yes, we must protect it, but we must also decide what to do next." The weight of the relic felt heavy in his hands as he considered the implications. Could he really use its power to save his village? Could he risk revealing it? He looked back at Lyra, who was now twirling in the fading light, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his heart. "Father?" She paused, noticing his solemn expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, my dear," he said, forcing a smile. "Everything will be all right." But deep down, he wondered if that was true. Would this discovery lead to salvation or disaster? As night fell, the stars shone brightly overhead, and the relic's glow dimmed but did not fade. Kyle felt the earth beneath him, alive and breathing. a reminder that hope could still bloom even in the darkest of times. He gently buried the relic again, making a promise to himself and to Lyra that he would find a way to protect it, to unlock its secrets, and to bring life back to their parched land. The echoes of the earth had called to him, and he knew he could not ignore them. Kale stood in the fading light of dusk, the ancient relic resting against his chest. The warm glow from its runes felt like a heartbeat, reminding him of the promise it held. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, worry crept into his mind. He knew the relic could help his village, but what if it fell into the wrong hands? His thoughts were interrupted when he heard voices nearby. The villagers had gathered at the square, their faces etched with concern. Kyle hurried over, clutching the relic tightly. "Kyle!" called Anira, the village elder, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We need to talk about what you found. This could be our chance to save Eldoria." Kale nodded, but his heart raced. "I know it can bring life back to our fields," he replied, his voice low. "But we must be careful. Lord Varric is already searching for it." The crowd murmured. Jarek, a tall man with a furrowed brow, stepped forward. "And what if he discovers it? The nobleman is greedy and would not think twice about taking it from us. We could lose everything." Anira raised her hand to quiet the crowd. "We must consider our options. If we hide the relic, we risk Varric finding it anyway. But if we reveal it, we will attract his attention." Kale felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "But if we use its power, we might stand a chance against him. We could save our crops and our families." "But at what cost?" Jarek countered. "What if the relic's magic brings disaster instead? We cannot gamble with our lives." "Jarek is right," Anira said. "We need to think this through. We are not just protecting ourselves. We are protecting our children. Kyle, you found it. You must lead us." Kyle glanced around the circle of concerned faces. He saw the fear in his neighbor's eyes, and it made his heart ache. "I want to help," he said, voice steadying. "But I need your support. I cannot do this alone." The villagers looked at one another, uncertainty lingering in the air. Finally, one woman stepped forward. "I believe in you, Kyle. If the relic can truly help us, we must try. But we need to act quickly." As night fell, Kale felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He would have to keep the relic hidden from Lord Varric, at least for now. But could he really keep it safe? The thought of losing it, and with it, the hope of his village, made him shudder. Suddenly, a distant sound broke through his thoughts. The clatter of hooves echoed in the night. Kale's heart raced as he turned to the crowd. "We must hurry! Varric's men could be near!" Panic spread among the villagers. They quickly dispersed, heading to their homes to prepare for whatever might come. Kale felt a rush of urgency. He needed to keep the relic safe, but he also had to protect his family and neighbors. As he walked home, Kale's mind raced. He had to come up with a plan. The relic could save Eldoria, but first, they had to keep it from falling into the hands of the greedy nobleman. Inside his small cottage, Kale found his daughter, Lyra, drawing pictures on a scrap of paper. Her innocence brought a smile to his face, even amid the chaos. "Lyra," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Do you believe in magic?" She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Magic? Like in the stories?" "Yes, but this is different. It's real, and it can help us," he explained, trying to keep his voice calm. "But we must be very careful." Lyra nodded, her small brow furrowed in thought. "What if it makes everything better, Papa?" Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibilities. "That is the hope, my dear, but we must keep it safe from those who would use it for evil." As he tucked Lyra into bed, Kale felt a flicker of determination. He would protect his daughter and his village. He would not let Varric ruin their only chance for a better future. The conflict within him simmered, but one thing was clear. He would do whatever it took to keep hope alive in Eldoria. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over Eldoria, a sense of dread filled the air. Whispers of the Relic's power had spread like wildfire, reaching even the ears of Lord Varick. His men began to encircle the village, their presence heavy with intimidation. The once peaceful life of the villagers was now tinged with fear and uncertainty. Kale stood outside his modest home, watching as the shadows grew longer. His heart ached for the safety of his daughter, Lyra. She played nearby, her laughter ringing out like a sweet melody, a stark contrast to the dark clouds gathering above them. She was a beacon of innocence, a reminder of what was at stake. "Father, look at the flowers!" Lyra exclaimed, pointing at a cluster of wildflowers that had bravely bloomed despite the harsh conditions. Her eyes sparkled with wonder, oblivious to the looming threat. Kale knelt beside her, forcing a smile. "They are beautiful, aren't they? Just like you, Lyra." But inside, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He vowed to protect her and their home at all costs. As night fell, the villagers gathered in secret. They met in the old barn, dimly lit by flickering lanterns. Kyle stood at the front, looking at the faces of his friends and neighbors. The tension was palpable, and whispers filled the air. "We must use the relic," said Anira, the village wise woman, her voice steady. "It can save our land and our people." "But what if it brings danger?" argued Jarek, his brow furrowed with concern. "Varick will come for it. We cannot draw attention to ourselves." Kale raised his hand for silence. "I understand the fear, but we cannot let Varick take what is ours. The relic is a gift from the earth. It can heal our land if we work together." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but doubt still lingered. "What if it only brings more trouble?" Jarek pressed, his voice rising. "What if using it means war?" Kale felt the weight of that question. He looked into the eyes of his neighbors, seeing their hopes and fears reflected back at him. "If we do nothing, we risk losing everything. Our crops, our homes, our families. We must stand together, united in our choice." Lyra entered the barn, her small figure illuminated by the lantern light. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Kale knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, my sweet girl, we will be okay. We have each other, and we will fight for our home." Anira stepped forward, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder. "You are right, Kale. We must decide now. Do we live in fear, or do we take a stand for our future?" The room fell silent as the villagers exchanged glances, weighing their options. Finally, one by one, they began to nod. Kale felt a rush of hope. They were ready to unite. "Let us gather what we need," Kale said, his voice strong. "If we are to protect our home, we must do it together." As the villagers left the barn, Kale felt a mix of determination and fear. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. The relic held great power, but it also attracted danger. That night, as Kale lay in bed, thoughts raced through his mind. He could see the faces of his friends, the laughter of Lyra, and the beautiful fields that surrounded them. The relic was their only chance, but what if it brought destruction instead of salvation? The next morning, the villagers gathered again, this time in the fields. Kyle stood at the forefront, the relic glowing softly in his hands. He felt its warmth, a connection to the earth that resonated deep within him. "Today," he began, his voice carrying across the crowd, "we stand together. We will protect our home and our future. The relic can help us, but we must be wise in how we use its power." The villagers nodded, their spirits lifting. They were ready to face the storm that was coming. Kale felt a flicker of hope ignite in his heart, knowing that they would fight not just for the relic, but for each other. The night was dark and heavy, filled with the distant sounds of chaos. A storm had gathered over Eldoria, both in the sky and on the ground. Kyle stood outside his modest home, his heart racing as he watched the flickering torches of Lord Varric's men approaching. The air crackled with tension, and the villagers, once filled with hope, now felt the weight of fear pressing down on them. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the night as Varric's forces broke through the village's defenses. Kale's breath caught in his throat. This was the moment he had dreaded, yet he felt a surge of clarity wash over him. He knew he could not let Varric seize the relic. It was time to act. "Gather the villagers," Kyle shouted, his voice rising above the noise. "We must stand together." Within moments, the worried faces of his neighbors emerged from the shadows. They looked to Kyle for guidance, their eyes reflecting both fear and a flicker of hope. He could see that they were scared, but he also sensed their strength. "Kyle, what can we do?" asked Anira, her voice trembling slightly. "We are outnumbered." Kyle took a deep breath and held the relic in front of him. It glowed softly, casting a warm light around them. This relic is not just a piece of stone. It has the power to help us, but we must unite. We cannot let fear divide us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jarek, who had been skeptical, stepped forward. "But how do we fight against Varric? He has soldiers, weapons. We have nothing." "We have each other," Kale replied firmly. "We have the land that we love and the spirit that binds us. If we stand as one, we can protect this village." The villagers exchanged glances, a sense of determination growing among them. Kyle felt a rush of courage surge within him. He continued, "I know you are afraid, but if we do not fight for what is ours, we lose everything. We fight not just for the relic, but for our families, our homes, and our future." Lyra, Kale's daughter, stepped out from the crowd, her eyes wide with worry, but filled with trust. "Father, I believe in you," she said softly. "We can do this together." Her words struck a chord in the hearts of the villagers. They began to nod, their resolve strengthening. Kale lifted the relic higher, its light shining brighter in response to their growing hope. "Let us stand together and show them that Eldoria will not be easily defeated." With renewed energy, the villagers formed a line, standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to defend their home. Kyle felt the warmth of their unity, a powerful force against the approaching darkness. He looked around at the faces of his friends and neighbors. They were ready to fight for their future. As the first of Varric's soldiers broke through the edge of the village, Kale shouted, "Now, for Eldoria!" The villagers surged forward, fueled by determination. The clash of metal and the shouts of battle filled the air, but Kale stood at the forefront, the relic glowing brightly in his grip. He could feel its energy coursing through him, giving him strength. "Together," he cried, rallying them. "We are stronger together." The villagers fought bravely, their fear replaced by a fierce desire to protect their home. Kale moved among them, encouraging each person with a smile or a word of praise. He could see the tide of battle beginning to turn. As dawn approached, the first light of day began to break through the clouds. The glow of the relic illuminated their faces, showing their determination. Kyle felt an overwhelming sense of pride and hope. They were not just defending a relic, they were fighting for their lives, for each other. In that crucial moment, as the battle raged around him, Kyle realized that true power lay not in the relic itself, but in the unity and spirit of the people of Eldoria. And as long as they stood together, they could face any storm that came their way. As dawn painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Kale stood at the edge of the village, heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with tension as he faced Lord Varric, who approached with a group of armed men. The villagers watched from a distance, their breaths held in anticipation. Kale felt the weight of their hopes resting on his shoulders. Step aside, farmer, Varric called out, his voice dripping with arrogance. That relic belongs to me now. Hand it over, and I might spare this miserable village. Kale clenched his fists, feeling the warmth of the relic pulsing against his skin. It does not belong to you, Varric. This relic is our lifeline. It belongs to Eldoria. Varric laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the morning air. You think you can stand against me? You are nothing but a simple farmer. Your people are scared, and they will abandon you. I would rather be a simple farmer than a greedy nobleman, Kale replied, his voice steady. The villagers whispered among themselves, their eyes locked on the two men. Enough of this nonsense, Varric snapped, stepping forward, his men flanking him like shadows. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I can take everything from you. But that is not the way, Kale said, raising the relic high so that the soft light illuminated his face. We can find a way for both of us. Let us talk instead of fighting. Varric paused, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. Talk? You think I want to waste my time negotiating with a peasant? Yes, Kyle insisted, his voice strong. If you want the relic's power, then we can work together. Eldoria can thrive, and you can benefit from it too. We can share the land. The villagers murmured, their uncertainty evident. Some nodded, while others exchanged worried glances. Kyle sensed their doubt, but pressed on. This is our chance to build something better. No one needs to die today. Varric's eyes narrowed, and Kale could see the gears turning in the nobleman's mind. And what makes you think I would trust you? Because, Kale said, stepping forward, what I offer is a path to wealth without bloodshed. If we negotiate, you could have a steady supply of resources from our land. We would work together, not against each other. The tension in the air was palpable. Varric hesitated, glancing back at his men, who looked unsure. The villagers, emboldened by Kale's words, began to shout in support. We stand with Kale! Anira's voice rang out, steady and clear. We will not bow to greed. Let him speak, Jarek added, his voice rising above the rest. We can find a way. A surge of energy rippled through the crowd, and Kale felt their collective strength bolster his resolve. He turned back to Varric, his heart racing. Think of the future, Varric. You can be a part of something greater. We can heal this land together. Varric's expression flickered between anger and contemplation. You think this changes anything? I have power, and I will take what I want. No, Kyle said, his voice firm. You have the chance to choose a different path, one where you do not have to rule through fear. The village held its breath, waiting for Varric's response. Finally, the nobleman's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he scoffed. You are either very brave or very foolish, farmer. Kale stood tall, unwavering. I choose hope over fear. I choose unity over conflict. The villagers erupted in cheers, their voices rising in a chorus of support for Cal. Varric's men shifted uneasily, their loyalty wavering as they watched the strength of the villagers. With a reluctant sigh, Varric stepped back, his eyes scanning the crowd. Fine, we will speak. But know this, Kale. I will not easily be swayed. Then let us begin, Kale replied, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. As he looked at the villagers around him, he felt their strength and determination. Together, they would find a way to protect their home and forge a new future, one where unity reigned over greed. The sun rose gently over Eldoria, casting warm light on the fields that had once been dry and lifeless. Kale stood at the edge of his farm, watching as the villagers began their day. The air was filled with a sense of hope, a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped them just days before. The relic, now a symbol of unity, glowed faintly in the early light, resting safely in the center of the village. Look at the crops, Lyra exclaimed, her voice bright with excitement. She pointed to the green shoots breaking through the soil, vibrant and full of life. They are growing faster than ever. Kale smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart. Yes, my dear, the earth is responding to our courage. We fought for our future, and now it is beginning to bloom. As villagers gathered, they shared stories of the confrontation with Lord Relic. Each tale was filled with pride and bravery, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Anira, the wise woman of Eldoria, spoke to the crowd. Our strength is not just in the relic, but in each other. We must continue to work together to build what we have started. Jarek, who had been skeptical of the relic's power, stood beside her. I was wrong to doubt. We have proven that unity can overcome greed. We are stronger together. Kyle stepped forward, feeling the weight of their eyes upon him. I could not have done this alone. Each of you played a part in our victory. Together, we have awakened the heart of Eldoria. The villagers cheered, their voices rising in a chorus of agreement. They were no longer just individuals struggling to survive. They were a community bound by shared experience. Later that day, Kale and Lyra walked through the fields, the sun warming their backs. The scent of fresh earth filled the air, and the sound of laughter echoed around them. It feels different now, doesn't it? Lyra asked, her eyes wide, as she took in the vibrant landscape. It does, Kyle replied, glancing down at her. It feels like we have a purpose. We are not just farming. We are nurturing our home. As they strolled, Lyra picked a small flower and held it up to her father. This is beautiful, just like our village now. Kale knelt beside her, examining the flower closely. Yes, and every flower, every crop, is a reminder of what we can accomplish when we stand together. Suddenly, they heard a commotion nearby. The villagers had gathered around the relic, which now stood in the center of the village square. Its glow seemed to pulse with energy, reflecting the unity they had forged. Anira was speaking again, her voice calm and steady. Let us honor what we have gained. We must share the relic's power, not just for ourselves, but for others who may need it. Jarek added, we should help neighboring villages. They may still be struggling, and we have the means to assist them. Kale stepped forward, inspired by their words. Yes, we can reach out to those in need. This relic is a gift, and it should be shared. Let us show that our strength lies not just in what we have, but in what we can give. The villagers cheered once more, their spirits lifted by the thought of helping others. Lyra looked up at her father, her eyes shining. I want to help too, Dad. Can I go with you? Kale smiled, feeling pride swell within him. Of course, Lyra. Together, we will spread the message of hope and unity. As the day came to a close, the sky painted itself in hues of orange and pink. Kyle and Lyra stood hand in hand, gazing at the fields that now promised a future filled with potential. Remember this moment, Lyra, Kyle said softly. This is just the beginning. Together, we can echo the spirit of unity throughout the land. With hearts full of hope, they turned to join their fellow villagers, ready to face whatever came next, united in purpose and love. And share this story if you believe that unity and hope can overcome the toughest challenges. Leave a comment about a time when coming together with others made a difference in your life. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one.